Hey guys, it's me, Chandra, and I hope your day is going good. I was getting into like recording mode. So I wanted to jump on to here because I wanted to film a video, but I don't really have the time to do a separate video. And I wanted to just kind of, help you guys out on my channel and then upload this onto YouTube. So if you are here on my business Facebook page, hi, thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, hey guys. Um, I got asked last week to do a video on milk supply. And I felt like it was a good time to do that because I promised that I'd have it done by the end of the week. So I'm going to talk about milk supply, how to increase it, things of that sort. But I also wanted something on my lip. I also wanted to kind of tie that into how you could choose a pump that would help with your milk boosting efforts, if that makes sense. Few disclaimers. My kid is watching TV, but she may come over. I apologize for that. She is 3.5, and we are experiencing all of the fun that is entailed with that. So if she starts screaming or if I need to get up to put her on the potty or anything, I hope that you guys will bear with me. And with this being a live and not an edited video, I tend to ramble. So I will try to put like jump forwards, like timestamps, if that becomes an issue. I hope it's not. I think that's all I have. So I get asked questions about milk supply quite a bit. And I don't want to assume that people don't know exactly what entails in a milk supply and how milk is made and things of that sort. But I do think it's important for people who are trying to manipulate their supply, be it increase it or decrease it, that it's kind of good to have a basic understanding of when is milk made, how it's made, and what is the processes that are needed, what are the processes that are needed to make milk. So to start off, your breasts make milk in the cells that make up the mammary glands. And during pregnancy, well, even prior to pregnancy, during each menstrual cycle, but specifically during pregnancy, you get a big like push of cell growth during that time period. And the cells that were typically dormant before are now awake, and that's why you start producing colostrum during pregnancy. Once you have your baby, the placenta is delivered after your baby, and that signals to your body that a baby was born and now you need to make a different kind of milk. And so that's why about day 3 to day 5, you'll see a transition from colostral type milk, which is, thick and potentially yellow in color, and it gradually turns into a milk that tends to be more white in color, thinner, and higher in volume. During that process, that is hormonal. There is no supply and demand during that process. But it's important to know that because hormones are a major part of milk production. And so I like to start off talking about how the hormones during pregnancy make milk, because I think it's easier to talk about hormones later when you realize that, okay, for the first, during the pregnancy, and for a 9 to 12 day period postpartum, your milk supply is primarily under hormonal control. After your milk comes in, I like to use the term transition because it's really just a transitioning, not a like arrival of actual milk. But once your milk starts to transition, the milk production is based on demand and supply. So the more milk you remove, the more milk that will be made. And that happens during the act of nipple stimulation. So just to make sure I'm not losing anybody, the act of actually stimulating your nipples is what produces the milk. Like that stimulation is the catalyst to milk production, which is why you may hear that like you're constantly making milk, that milk production is the highest when your baby's actually nursing. A lot of people are very concerned about, oh my gosh, I just pumped, now my baby's hungry, I have no milk. the act of stimulating your nipples, be it via pump or directly nursing, is what sends the prolactin surge and creates milk. Okay. I'm not going to go all into detail with that, but when people see that there's no pump output, like let's say they're pumping or they're nursing or whatever, and they don't have any milk, they're like, crap, I don't need to nurse and I can't pump because I'm not getting anything out. Therefore, I have no milk. When really the demand for the volume of milk, why is this thing on my lip? It's really bothering me. Sorry. The demand for the milk precedes the actual supply. Okay, so how this kind of applies, if you are feeling as though your supply is low, the first and the easiest thing to address is how frequently you are stimulating your nipples. We say milk removal because that plays a role, and I'll get to that in a second, but really it's stimulation. Twiddling, rubbing, manual with your hands, getting your partner involved. If that's something that you guys do, that's not going to be a problem. And anytime there could be nipple stimulation, that's going to be good. More traditionally, you have like pumping or nursing, but it doesn't matter how, and that's the point I'm trying to come across. It doesn't matter how, the act of nipple stimulation is going to be what signals to your body to make milk. So I tend to tell clients that come to me who have concerns with supply, assuming that we haven't assessed any other of the big picture and just we're going off what they say that they have low supply. The first thing that I suggest is to increase the times of expression or nursing. And that does the increased nipple stimulation, which increases the demand, which the supply will follow. But it also gives the opportunity for adequate emptying, which is another part of the production regulation cycle. So do that. And if you've just nursed, pump after. If you've just pumped and your baby's hungry, nurse. It doesn't matter if there's like a surplus of milk there or not. Either way, the first thing that anybody should be doing when they're trying to build their supply is increase the nipple stimulation. When we talk about when I talk about good breast drainage, that's a different aspect, and this is how it ties in. So nipple stimulation creates the surge of prolactin, but milk removal prevents the breast from sending the signal that they need to slow down production, because there's a little factor called fill, and it tells the body when the breasts get too full to slow down. Like, we don't need any milk anymore, like at the rate that you're producing it, because we're reaching maximum capacity. And so because it is a regulation, it's kind of like I think it's a negative feedback loop. I'm not sure. I don't know off the top of my head for that. But essentially what it does is when your breasts are empty, the rate of production is really, really fast. And as your breasts start to fill, the fill tell your body to slow down production. At some point, if there's no milk removal, then your body gets a signal, whoa, I'm making way too much milk. This is not a sustainable amount of milk. It's not getting used, so I need to make less milk. And this is where a lot of people get into some problems, because they will, try to extend their baby's nursing out, or they may drop a pump, or they, feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not engorged anymore. And I was engorged during the milk transition early on, and therefore I need to let my breast fill up. And that is the last thing. We want empty breasts all the time. If that is the motto that you go by, how can I get my breast as empty as possible? That is the mindset that will help boost your supply. Like, constantly empty. I need them empty, empty, empty. So going back to the fill, if you're not having adequate breast drainage and your body is making milk at a higher rate than is being removed, then you're going to downregulate your supply. Sometimes this is on purpose, which is good to know, because when people have like oversupply, for example, it's a technique that you can use in conjunction with other things to reduce the supply. But for most people, that is something that you're going to want to avoid, is like fullness. each person is going to be different. So your rate of production on average is about the same across the board, but there's some variation and it depends on breast fullness. And the storage capacity specifically is going to differ. So my storage capacity, I may only be able to hold 3 ounces per breast before I'm getting that signal of, whoa, I have too much milk. Or compared to somebody else who has, 10 ounces per breast, and that can, go a lot longer before they get that signal. It's impossible to tell you based on looking at you what your storage capacity is going to be. And sometimes it takes, trial and error to be like, oh, okay, well, I get full every 3 hours. So in that case, you're going to need to express or nurse before that time. Whereas there's some people out there who have magnificent storage capacities that can go 12 hours and not even feel full. It's going to depend, but that is an important factor in trying to figure out how you can boost your supply. Nipple stimulation is great, but it also needs to be coinciding with milk removal, but they don't necessarily have to go together. One way we see that is where people are using the haka on one side while they're nursing or pumping on the other side. That solves the problem of milk removal, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of adequate nipple stimulation. So it's why I tell people that if they're using the haka, great, but it doesn't stimulate the breast like a pump does, which is what I'm going to show you. Now, the mechanical aspect of increasing supply is pretty straightforward. You just stimulate more and you remove more milk, and within a week, 2 weeks time, you may start noticing an increase. There's a lot of different nuances in that because it depends on how, for example, somebody who is trying to increase their supply after having, I don't know, a really rocky start for a couple of months is going to need to take more, hey Heather, is going to need to take more effort, I guess, or it's going to be a longer process potentially before they start noticing a increase in their supply. Whereas somebody who, in the early weeks just are concerned with low supply, maybe their baby hasn't been transferring well because they have tongue tie, for example, but they're catching it early on and they're addressing their supply, they're going to potentially have an easier time ramping up their supply than compared to the previous situation. So you got to be patient. You got to know what your expectations are. You got to understand that it takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of concern. This is a tangent. I do those often. There's a lot of concern about people pumping in the early weeks after or in the first couple of weeks after baby is born. Hey Zoe, after baby is born, and the concern is oversupply. Like, oh my goodness, if you stimulate your breast too soon, you're going to have an oversupply. Which I'm not minimizing because it can be a really big challenge. But in the scheme of things, it's harder to build your supply. It's harder because you have to do more, right? So your baby's already nursing 8 to 12 times a day. In order to build your supply from that, you have to pump or nurse more than that. So then now you're just figuring out how do you increase your pump output to 16 times a day because baby eats 12 times and I need to find more time. It's harder to squeeze that in. Whereas it's easier in most cases for, just a mechanical oversupply issue that was created in the early weeks to down-regulate because it's easier to stretch out the feeds longer or pump sessions longer than it is to try to find time on top of parenting to add them. I'm not saying that people across the board need to add pumping into their early, weeks postpartum. I'm just using that as an example to kind of, reframe how we're looking at, oh my goodness, we need to not do this, or we definitely need to do this, because not only based on people's situations may it differ, but there's going to be people out there that without that stimulation, even if they did it by accident because they were just concerned, may have had a harder time long term. Because it takes some time, depending on how closely you're working with a lactation professional, to see if there's tie issues, to see if there's transfer issues, to see if there's stimulation issues. And so in some cases, the whole across the board don't express early on can be a hindrance to some breastfeeding relationships. I don't know where I was going with that. I just thought I'd mention that. So how do you increase your supply? You add more stimulation, you drain your breast as well as possible, and you identify any areas that may be contributing, like pacifier use, supplementation, bottles, things like that. If you're using those things, there's nothing wrong with that, but those are areas to explore if you're trying to increase your supply. It doesn't make much sense to be offering your baby a pacifier all the time when you're trying to build your supply, because your baby has a desire to suck. You're meeting that desire to suck with a pacifier, but now your nips are hanging out, just not getting stimulated, making more work for you. So anytime we could reduce the pacifier bottles, increase the frequency, not time or limit feeds, among other things, the more quickly we may see a increase in supply. The important thing, like I mentioned about the tongue tie thing and stimulation, is that in order for a baby to be a good tool to build supply, they have to transfer well. Usually people have fine supplies, but eventually, because of poor transfer or because of discoordination or dysfunction of the suck or oral function, for example, you'll see a decrease in your supply eventually. And that's what you see a lot of times around 3 months, 4 months, some random, like, my supply immediately dropped, and a little bit more investigation, you find out that there was just poor drainage or poor stimulation. So it's important that if you have concerns with low supply, regardless if you're handling it at home, you're just increasing your pumps, you're doing what I'm saying, like draining and pumping and whatnot, that you get seen by a lactation professional who can assess things that you may not even be aware of. We look at a lot of things. We look at the big picture. It's kind of hard as a parent to know all of the different things that may go along with why your supply might be problematic or a challenge. And so having that professional who can deal with that is really helpful. But there's going to be times where the mechanical stimulation doesn't work. And in those cases, a health history is important, because there may be an underlying health or medical reason that may be contributing to low supply. So thyroid issues can cause some supply issues, blood loss at some point, car accidents, nerve damage, breast surgery or augmentation, other health things, and if you've had issues with fertility issues, for example, that may contribute to low supply. Not all across the board, and there's going to be plenty of people who have low supply for none of those reasons. But I think we often think of like lactation professionals, especially, this doesn't necessarily apply to me, but especially the IBCLCs that are working with people. I know that it's kind of hard to think of them as a like legit healthcare professional, but that's what their role is. They're actual healthcare professionals. So it's not just about, looking at latch. They're exploring the medical side, like your doctor would, of lactation issues. And so if you, for example, are increasing your stimulation and you haven't noticed the results in a week, and you were hesitant to reach out to an IBCLC, those are the times that you would definitely want to, versus just like, I don't know, this is not working, I don't want to do this anymore. Those feelings are valid, but you may be limiting yourself with the information that you're able to get. Where was I going with this? So there's hormonal aspects. And in order for your supply to be great, you need to have the breast talking to the brain and the brain talking to the breast or chest, whatever. And so it's important to get that assessed when manual stimulation does not work. I get lots of questions about supplements. What supplements can I take? There are some medications like Reglan and domperidone, and some foods that so domperidone and Reglan are medications that have been proven to increase milk supply because they have an effect on hormones. You also have some lactogenic foods that also may have an effect on hormones, and that is why some people see increase in supply. But for all of the other supplements or mom hacks or parent hacks where they're talking about like, this is how you increase your supply, those you got to show me on how you think they're going to work, and we can talk about that individually, because there are blue Gatorade, for example. so that I'm trying to be as respectful about the topic as possible, but because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, and I don't want to sound condescending. That's not my point. That's not my intention. Grade, for example, a lot of people really feel like that is helpful. And when you look at it, anecdotally, there's going to be people who suggest that that is what helped increase their supply. From a lactation professional who studies lactation and understands the physiology of how milk is made and whatnot, there's no science behind that. And so it's important to kind of think about, why might something be claiming to be work, like why might something be purported to work when there isn't any influence on either one, milk removal, nipple stimulation, or hormones. Hydration is one possible reason why blue Gatorade is suggested to work, but you could be, in theory, seeing that same response with water or some other beverage. So I pose that just because it's important when we're talking about building supply. So how do you build your supply? Increase stimulation, reduce or drain your breast effectively, and if those are not working, get some blood work, get your hormones checked, make sure that transfers well, all of those things. So that was a 21-minute rant. I apologize for that. I was trying to keep this short, but pumping. Okay, so the reason why I want to pull out the pump is because I also realized that related to this in the breast drainage part is that people may not be understanding what the letdown process is. And if they're not understanding what the letdown process is, then they may not be adequately draining their breast because they're not exactly sure what they're looking for with pumping. So the letdown process, or the milk ejection reflex, is where your breast get like release the milk, right? Huh? Puzzle pieces? Are you gonna watch a show? We're not playing. Oh, gosh. So my kid's here. Appreciate it. These are demo breasts. These are demonstration breasts. These are not toys. You can play with this one. You can play with this one. Go and play with that one, please. Okay, so I'm sorry. So here we have a demo breast. The letdown process is pretty, I can summarize it by this. So this nipple stimulation happens. It sends a signal to your brain. That your brain releases a hormone called oxytocin, and that oxytocin tells your breast, okay, it's time to release the milk. And so the muscles around your alveoli, which is the part that makes milk, squeezes, and it sends milk down the ducts and off the nipple. A lot of people claim or report, just like I reported, it's not judgy, it's just a lot of people say that it feels like tingly or tightness. They may get sweaty or nauseated or something, and that's typical of a letdown sensation in the early weeks. Letdown sensations go away. Like it's okay to not have a sensation. So if you've never had it, that's perfectly fine. But it can be kind of uncomfortable for some people, and other people don't mind it at all. But that's what's happening. It's the hormonal rush that releases milk. So what is important is when you're pumping, right, you may have drops and drips, but you may not see the output that you're hoping for or looking for if you're not adequately stimulating a letdown. And one way that I commonly see this is because they don't know how their pumps work. And I have pumps on hand, so if anybody wants a, like, how does this pump work and whatever, like, just let me know. But for today, I'm going to use a Spectra because a lot of people are using the Spectra, and a lot of the Spectra is kind of funny. So just so we're tracking on the letdown. So let's get there's water in my pump from a demo I did earlier or recently, so don't mind that. Okay, please stop. Yeah, I gave you the demo breast, the other demo breast. This one's not for you. Okay, so with the Spectra, just to show you guys. So we have the demo breast. This is not properly sized. So if you're feeling like this is when you see it pumping and you see all of the suction in and stuff like that, that's not properly I'm working. Do you want to help Mama? Or do you want to watch TV?
Help, Mama.
Okay, you want to help Mama? How about this? You hold this water bottle and you hold it right there and I will look at it. Okay, thank you for being such a good helper. Okay, so what usually happens when you... I am ready.
1, 2, 3, go.
Go. Oh, I haven't pushed it yet. Okay, so what essentially happens usually when a baby's nursing, so let's do a baby nursing first because this is supposed to mimic a baby nursing, is there's no milk flow at a high volume, so babies usually do a lot of quick sucks. They go really quickly to stimulate a letdown, right? So it gets that sensation, the brain releases the oxytocin, the milk starts to flow. Perfect. So then that suck pattern turns from a short, quick suck to long draws, right? About 1 every second, where there you may hear some swallowing, you may hear go like, well, please don't do that. I'm trying to make it sound like, right? They're like, that's what when babies are drinking. The pump is designed to stimulate similar suck patterns, but some pumps you need to have a little bit more control over. With, for example, the Medela pump, it starts automatically in a massage mode, right? Which is the quick, soft sucks that a baby would automatically use. The Spectra does not start off in a massage mode. It starts off in expression mode. Okay, so you turn it on and it starts off in expression mode. Right now I have this on cycle 54 and level 9. I bumped this down to cycle 38 and I'll talk about that in a second. But essentially the Spectra does not start off in the same pattern a baby would. So the first thing you're going to do is push the wavy buttons, which is the let down button. And you see how the sucking pattern is different. It's like small and like wiggly, and it's not pulling it as deep. Okay, that is to stimulate a letdown. What usually happens is you'll have this on here for a minute or two, and in theory, you'll see milk start to squirt out or flow at a consistent pace. Thank you. You got to fill it up. Okay, not yet. You'll see milk start to consistently flow. At that point is when you would push the wavy lines again. It would be the let down button, and it will change to a longer draw suck pattern. This is where you have the most control. You can go to a higher suck rate. So right now I have it on 38, which means that it will do this pull 38 times in 1 minute. But let's say I don't like that, I want it to be more, then I just increase it goes up to 54. So you can see it's a little bit more rapid, but not as rapid as the massage mode at the beginning. And I also can control how strong I want it to be. So right now it's on 9. I can pop it down to 1. So you can see the barely any suction, right? Barely any. Or I can pop it up to, you can see how strong it's drawing. Okay, so why do I mention that? Okay, yes, I can pop it, but I'm not going to. So why do I mention that? So here's some things I see. So parents will turn on the pump, and this is any pump. I was just using the, please stop, the Spectra as an example because a lot of people don't know necessarily how to, what the different cycles do and how to play around with it. But so essentially what people will do is they'll hook their pumps up and they will pump for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, and they may or may not ever have a letdown. And so what they'll see is they'll see drips, but they'll never see sprays, and they they'll only see one, which will be like they'll pump, no milk, then milk flows, milk stops, and they're like, well, good, I pumped and I got milk out, and so I'm done. Well, your letdown, because your breasts aren't a cup, they actively release milk. You want to stimulate more releases for better breast drainage. The more you're draining your breast, the more you are telling your body you need milk, thus you're increasing your supply. So, especially for the Spectra, which you have some control over the speed of sucking and the suction vacuum pressure, it may take some maneuvering to find out what is comfortable enough for you. Ari, nobody's giving you anything right now. You have your apple. Can you please stop? Okay, please, we're not doing this right now. Ari, mommy's working. Here, I got this. You're the water bottle keeper. Thank you. I am so sorry. It's just one of those things. Oh, it's already the glue's already coming off. Well, that's kind of annoying. All right, so what was I saying? You have some control over the suction speed and the suction volume. So you have a little bit more control to find what is actually going to feel the best for you. You're going to want to find the highest sucking vacuum pressure that is comfortable for you. If pumping is uncomfortable, like let's say it's just too much suction volume, it's okay to turn it down. It's not like the higher suction volume is going to suck out more milk, because that's not how breasts work. She's distracting me. It's so bad. So there's that. Another reason why they may not be seeing the output is because of the flange fit. When you're trying to build your supply, I mean, for breast drainage, it's Ari, can you please stop? Do you want me to put your show back on? Yeah? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Yes, baby. I'm sorry. I literally cannot think. So when we're talking about building the supply, remember. Okay, I'm sorry. I put the wrong show on for her. Sorry. One moment. You want Jake in the Buccaneer thing? Okay, there you go. Sit down, please. Thank you. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, so when we're talking about building supply, right, and we're talking about nipple stimulation, one of the main reasons why people can be, oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. I know, for whoever, hey, I'm sorry, Heather. I know, I was gone. I'm just talking about building supply and pumping. Okay, I'm so sorry. So when we were talking about the nipple stimulation, right, one thing that a lot of people are doing is they're pumping and pumping and pumping, but they're using the wrong size. Wait, where am I? I know. I'm sorry, Maria. I hope you're still here. I had to go turn my kid's show on because she was bothering me and I could not think. And she's still bothering me, and I still can't think. But that is where I went. I am so sorry. Whoever is still here, I apologize. Okay, so what I was saying, Ariana, what? Don't put your finger in it. What were you doing? Okay, here. Sorry. Can you go take that, please, back and go watch your show? Mommy's trying to work. Okay, so essentially yes, it's a fake boob. Yes, they're my demo boobs. They're for showing my pumping things. So what I was saying is, so people, what will happen is they will be pumping, and because they're wearing improperly fitted flange, their nipples will not get stimulated, and because they're not pumping with a proper size flange, they're not getting the milk output, and so their breasts aren't getting empty. When you don't have empty breasts, when they're not getting drained, your milk supply is going to go down. So it's really important to make sure that one of the first things that you're addressing if you're not seeing a good pump output is your flange size. People are very confused about how to size, and I totally get it. It's not that intuitive. But essentially what you're doing is you are measuring the nipple diameter from just this nipple, so just this part that sticks out, from one side to the other. However wide that is going to be around what size flange you use. For me, I have really tiny nipples. My flange should, my nipple is 12 millimeters. That means I should be using about a 15 millimeter flange. These standard flanges for all of them usually are about 24, 20 to 26. These are humongous on me. And I managed to somehow uh, keep a supply in the early months or in the early weeks when I was exclusively pumping, even though I was using the wrong size flange, just because of my hormones and the fact that I was, still hand expressing after and things like that. And when I stopped pumping exclusively, if it wasn't for actually nursing, if I continued to use this size flange, my supply would have tanked drastically. So it's really important that you are having the proper size flange. So when all else fails and you're trying to build your supply, the first thing you should address is your flange size. Actually measure it. That will give you a starting point, and then see how it functions, like how it is actually in the tunnel. If there's rubbing, if there's too much areola pulling in there, because tissue elasticity is going to play a role, just like other factors that I just don't want to waste all of you guys' time talking about in this exact video. If you guys want to see that in the future, I will talk about it. So that's one. Two, if you're trying to build your supply, even after you pump, assuming that you turn it on and you get your letdown, if you have just one letdown, right? People ask, do you pump for the time allowance, or do you pump until you're empty? Do you pump until you stop dripping? What it is. So to clarify, you're supposed to pump until your breasts are empty if you have the time to do it. So if you're at work and you only have 15 minutes, it's okay if you only have 15 minutes to pump. If you're at home and you're just trying to squeeze in a little stimulation action and the purpose is for stimulating, it's all right if you just do that for a short period of time. But if you are trying to, if you're relying on expression or you're really trying to build your supply, you need those times where you adequately drain your breast, which may mean that, and for a lot of people they need to do this, is they need to massage their breasts beforehand, right? So jiggle, shake, twiddle, whatever you need to do to stimulate the blood flow, right? And then you pump. The letdown should happen in theory within the first 2 minutes or so. Medela says that if it doesn't happen, you go back to the letdown phase and then you try again. And if that doesn't work, you stop. But most people will have a letdown within the first couple minutes. And then you pump, pump, pump until the flow stops. And what I like to do is I like to stop the pump and I like to massage again. And you're giving yourself a 30-second to a minute break. That allows a new oxytocin release, and you hook back up your pump and you should see another letdown. Now there are conditions in which, or situations in which your letdown may be affected. This is just basic. You can sit around the block. Heather says that she can stretch her tissues around the block. I think I'm right there with you, girl. But what was I saying? What was I saying? Oh, I can't even remember now. We're talking about boob elasticity, and I just completely lost my train of thought. It may come back to me. I don't know. But oh yeah, it gives time for the new oxytocin release, and then you put it back on and you should be able to do that. In a 30-minute period, you may need to unplug your, not unplug, but take off your pump and hand massage or whatever. But that technique is really beneficial for a lot of people to get a new oxytocin release. Now, like I was saying, that's where I was going, that there may be some situations in which oxytocin releases or the milk ejection reflex may be inhibited or prevented from doing. That's something that you'd be working with your lactation consultant with. But in most cases, this is just general, normal, physiological. They have letdowns. They just are trying to figure out how to increase the supply. So that is how you do it. You just try to do some massaging in between pumping. So you take a break, give your breast time to rest, do some stimulation to your actual breasts, and then hook back up. Also, a technique that I suggest everybody using, even if you are not trying to build your supply. Well, unless you're trying to downregulate, but assuming that you're just normal people trying to just express. Oh, are my eyeliners really that off? They did not look that much off when I was doing my makeup, but they're really bad. All right, so we're just ignoring that. So, yeah, after you do your pump session, let's say you're done, you've gotten 3 letdowns, just hand express for, 3 to 5 minutes after. That is going to, again, better drain your breast, provide manual stimulation, so it's solving those two birds with one stone, but also it gives you the ability to see if there's any areas of your breast that haven't been adequately drained. Because just because you're pumping doesn't mean your whole breast is going to be drained the same. And that is an important thing to note, because what can happen is you may be seeing decent amount of milk output, but if this side of your breast isn't getting drained, then this side of your breast is going to start not making milk. Eventually, not right away, but that's why we want to make sure your whole breast is drained. And hand expression after helps not only do that, but it helps, get the fat off the ducts that were stuck over, and lots of benefits. So do that. Does anybody here, I know not a lot of people stayed in the whole time, but does anybody have any questions or any tips that they want to add for about building supply? I went over how supply works, frequent nipple stimulation, milk removal, addressing the hormone component, and if you don't see any improvement in the milk removal process and output, to do that. I don't want to get into what actually constitutes low supply, because that is a whole different conversation of its own. But I want to make sure I didn't skim over anything that anybody is needing about building their supply. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, actually building your supply, your armpit area always seems to be fuller after pumping. Maria says, I would massage breasts and squeeze a bit while I was pumping just to get some extra milk out. That is a good point too. So breast compressions while you're actually doing it. And Heather, I'll talk to you about I'll make a comment about that in a second. Yeah, so in addition, right, so if breast drainage is the goal, then breast compressions mimics the same thing that would happen during a letdown, right? Instead of your cells actually getting compressed due to the, muscle tissue around, or the muscle cells around the milk making cells, you're actually just compressing it and creating the pressure to make the milk go. So if your baby is slow to transfer or having some difficulties with transferring, squeezing your breast and doing breast compressions, and a lot of people are like, well, I can't fit my whole breast in my hands. It doesn't have to be. You can literally just do the outside. You can just press like that. Either way, gentle, firm pressure will help push that milk out. But this is also especially effective for maximizing how much milk you get out during your pump session. Because let's face it, if you pump long enough, you'll probably get all your milk out. But we want to figure out how can we get the most milk out within, 15 to 25 to 30 minutes. So breast compressions are really helpful. If you're using the technique of like stopping your pump and restarting again, you don't need to do breast compressions the first letdown, right? Especially because then a lot of people are like, well, I've been, squeezing, so that's good. You can if you'd like to, but I like to, that first letdown, just relax a little bit. Try to not even think about pumping. Sometimes that really helps with milk output. And then once you rehook up the pump, that is usually when I would say that, squeezing in some breast compressions, pun intended, is helpful. It will help with the output. It will help with the breast drainage. And since breast drainage is what we're looking for when we're building supply, that is fantastic. Heather says her armpit always seems to be fuller after pumping. Now, let me ask you, and this may be, I'll have to make sure I'm up on the chat. After you delivered, did you have that area swell up? Like when your milk started to transition, and did it get engorged? I'm just trying to see if this is like typical, like you've had this the whole time that you were, like, since your baby was born. And I will wait for that response if you're going to put it. Maria says, sometimes I nursed on one breast and pumped the other at the same time. That is a fantastic thing to mention because you're already working on your baby's natural oxytocin release. So babies are cute, they're snuggly, they're warm, they're like, oh, so cute. We love to like let down to them. Heck, we let down to other people's kids sometimes, you know, we're like, oh, there's a baby, right? That happens. So the pump, you don't have that same response. Like, I'm sorry, this setup to me is not cute. There's nothing like warm and fuzzy. It doesn't give me the feel goods. So pumping on one side while your baby is nursing on the other side can be an effective way, especially if baby doesn't take both breasts, to maximize like the amount of milk you're removing without adding any extra time to your cycle, like your session. It can be cumbersome. There's different pumps that may work better for that. I know a lot of people like the Haka. Other people have no problem setting up like an actual pump like this that's like the Spectra size. You've got smaller pumps like the Lancinol Smart Pump, which may be less bulky. I don't think this is pocket size like the Unimom, but it's maybe a lot more manageable for some people. Or you can pull out a hand pump if you need to, nurse baby and pump on one side. Either way, pumping at the same time as nursing is really a time saver. And it allows, you know, especially for those who need to triple feed, one way that a lot of people do it is that they'll nurse, then they'll pump, and then they'll feed the expressed milk. One kind of way to do that is you can nurse, express simultaneously, offer the expressed milk after you either, let's say baby takes both breasts, you can offer that side, then offer the expressed milk, or you can do the inverse of that. Feed baby on the breast, express the milk, feed that milk, then put baby on the already drained breast that you expressed so that gets extra stimulation. It just really depends on if transfer is an issue and how much of that is an issue, but that's a good technique. Okay, so Heather says, not really. It was just like milk was in that area that I had to help the milk out. It was like the milk in my side boob held onto the milk the longest. Okay, so breast anatomy. I don't have any diagrams of an actual like breast armpit, but we all like, I'm going to show you guys my boobs. Here's my boob, right? Here's my nipple. We're going to give you some landmark on my anatomy. And here's what people commonly think of the breast. And Heather, let me know if I'm in the wrong direction here. You say that you get a lot of milk kind of up in this area, right? Like you get some fullness when you pump up in this area, where it's still on your chest wall, but it's not necessarily like in your armpit, which would be right here. Let me know if I'm in the wrong direction or the right direction before I answer your question or before I talk about it. You can also use the hand pump. Yeah. Right. There's a delay, so I'm just gonna give her the option to answer that for me before I start chatting. Did you get that? Just in case I'm making sure that the area that you're talking about is the outer quadrant that kind of is still on your chest wall but comes up towards your armpit and not actually in your armpit. That's what I'm asking. Yeah, okay, got the confirmation. So your breast tissue extends up your chest wall. Okay, right? So we think of this area being mainly breast tissue, and it is, and it's different on everybody, but like your actual breast. But you also have breast tissue that kind of creeps up towards your armpit. That's called the tail of Spence, and sometimes the drainage, because most of the milk making stuff, like if you ever thought about like why most plugs or like firmness happens in this part of the breast, it's because there's a lot of milk making tissues in there. And sometimes what happens is if you're pumping, and this may or may not be due to drainage. This may just be your natural physiology, so they might not be a problem. But a lot of people may get some fullness up there as they let down, or they may notice it more as the pressures are released in their actual breast, like the other breast parts. And so Heather was saying that what she does is she slides down like this while she's doing compressions to help to drain the breast, and that's a good thing to use. So I personally, because of my breast size, shape, and elasticity, I was always able to just like, before I have all these weirdos talk about squeeze my boobs again, I would always just squeeze like that. But uh yeah, stroking is an option. And a lot of people may feel really uncomfortable up in this area, especially during the engorgement stage right after baby's still, born. And that's normal. Cold compresses will really help with that. Um, Cold compresses really help with that. Essentially, and yep, it's a good way to get all of the stuff out. So you can do strokes, you can do rubbing, you can do squeezing. Either way, I know the topic is low supply. We're kind of getting into like milk removal techniques, which again, if anybody wants that, I can make a whole video on that. I can make a video on so many things. I have so much to talk about. But essentially, I promised that I'd have a how to increase supply video, and I hope this counts. Essentially, the answer to your question is increase the number of expression, make sure that expression is effective. If those are not working, get your hormones checked to rule out any underlying health issues. And in a lot of cases, it's a compound issue. So like I had briefly mentioned in the video, tongue tie can cause poor drainage, which can reduce the supply. Many people overlook the tongue tie, but may notice the supply, get freaked out, and try to figure out, well, how do I increase supply? You say, okay, well, has feeding challenges been ruled out? They say, oh, she has a boob. Hold on. Ariana? Did you want it? I knew that was going to happen. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm really glad they sent me 2 of these because I had this literally less than 1 day. I got these yesterday and she already popped it. And she was too quiet. I noticed the TV wasn't on. I hope that's not problematic. Please. Oh my gosh. I know it's so wet. I love kids. If you were thinking about having more, yay. Awesome. I'm putting that thought on hold for right now. Ariana, take it. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to wrap this up because she is covered in boob juice and not the milky kind, literally this kind. But I was talking about before, a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, well, what does that have to do with anything? Why is, why are you assessing or asking me about if my baby's tongue tied or how they're feeding? And oftentimes supply is a byproduct of poor feeding. So even if you think baby feeds well, if you have no other explanation of why your supply is dipping, it was good, now it's not, you're not pregnant, you didn't start any birth control, you've increased the amount of nursing, then it's really, I know, back to water balloons. Well, I still have water left in my flange from that experiment. Please put that down. Then that is the important, that's important to assess. So I promise I'm not just telling everybody, if you're watching this video and I've told you to get a feeding evaluation done, it's not because I'm trying to just be like, oh, everybody needs a feeding evaluation, but it is one of the first places to start because it will explain your low supply when there's no other explanations that are like super obvious. So yeah. I was trying to keep this to an hour. Popped boob. Thaddeus wants to see Aria or Ari. Yeah, if Thaddeus is here, Ari, do you want to say hi? She's got makeup on, so don't judge me, people. Here, and she's in her underwear, and they're soaked because there's boob juice. But say hi to Thaddeus. Yeah, hi, Thaddeus. What's wrong? Your boob juice all over you. Okay, well, I'll get that. I did not expect her to say that. So yeah, and I'm sorry, like I said, I was trying to do a live. I didn't have this planned out. I wasn't also expecting people to actually join. So I really appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you're watching this on YouTube and you have any questions and you want to see any video and you've stuck around this long, please let me know in the comments below. This video was inspired by somebody who asked me to do a video on this, and I feel bad because my last video was an hour too. Apparently my YouTube channel went from, 10-minute videos to hour-long live things, but I hope that it was helpful. I have a blog about this as well that I recently wrote. I'm going to link that down in the comments below so that you guys can read it and it's not going to be as rambly. But if you have any questions about supply, letdown, you want more in-depth information about what can cause low supply, if you want me to talk about oversupply, anything, let me know and I will hop back on here and do a video like this, since I am a lot less nervous and I don't have to do like 3 hours of recording just for a video that I don't feel confident in. Yeah, so if there's no other questions, then I'm going to tune off and then get this uploaded to YouTube. I appreciate everybody watching, and I will see you guys later.